by Jasper L'Estrange. It was the end of the Pratt family's holiday, and naturally everyone was tired and cross. Crammed into the little car amongst the overspill of their belongings from the boot, they were all privately fulminating about one thing or another. The children that they were about to be cheated, as they saw it, out of a McDonald's Happy Meal. The parents about the numberless petty grievances, annoyances, doubts, and deep-seated resentments they had each accumulated over the course of their marriage. It was, it ought to be said, unbelievably hot. When the man, driving, lifted his fingers from the steering wheel, there was a pronounced slick. Since leaving the motorway, their journey had been soundtracked by a radio station whose playlist might have been hand-picked to provide irritating commentary to their predicament. But somehow it was this slick, this relatively small, harmless, undeniably organic sound that provoked the wife. "I thought you said just up this road," said Hannah Pratt, for she was the wife to Ian Pratt and mother of 2 young Pratts. "Well, the sign said," her husband began, but had there even been a sign? Uncertainty halted his speech. This was not unusual, since he was prone to self-doubt, increasingly so since marriage and children. And, unfortunately for him, the doubt was often justified. Nevertheless, since seeing that trio of roadside signs that had read, "A hot meal and toilets," "home-cooked food and rooms," being a writer by trade, those misplaced apostrophes had irked, and "family farm services," a good few miles had elapsed. So, had he seen them at all? Experience told him that to articulate this doubt to Hannah was to light a touch paper. For as long as the narrow country road continued to unspool in front of them, and the promise of a hot meal and toilets was forever just around the next bend, hope remained. The resentful faces of the children, glanced in the rearview mirror, were illuminated by their mobile phone screens, giving them a sickly green pallor. He knew his wife's expression without looking, so chose not to. Everyone, Ian included, was still tense from a bump in the road that had caused Ian to briefly lose control and for the car to swerve dramatically, or they were nearly sent hurtling into the dense forest that flanked them on either side. "This is so typical of you, Ian," said Hannah. "We passed a McDonald's half an hour ago." 45 minutes, said Ian bravely. "It was too early to stop then. You agreed." "The children wouldn't have minded. You promised them McDonald's." "Promised?" Ian bristled, clutching the wheel tightly. Promised? It was bloody dinner, not a pledge to leave them the house. And if his wife hadn't insisted he let the children charge their precious devices, then his phone wouldn't have run out of charge, and he wouldn't have lost sight of the GPS navigation app for long enough to miss the turn-off, which put them on their present course in a now quite obviously misguided attempt to get back to the road on which they ought to have been. Some mumbled, garbled reiteration of this sequence of events came from the driver's seat, prompting Grace, older of the 2 Pratt children, to declare, "Amelia's dad's got built-in GPS in his car." "Of course he does," said Ian. "Don't take it out on the children," said Hannah. From the back seat, the young son of the Pratts began screaming. "He doesn't like it when you shout at each other," said Grace. "We're not shouting at each other, we're disagreeing loudly," Ian said, bellowing over the din. "No, sweetie, just put your ear defenders on, there's a good boy," said Hannah, twisting in her seat to give her son a reassuring smile. We'll stop for something to eat and drink soon, won't we, Daddy? She turned to her husband, glowering. Won't we? But Ian didn't respond. His mouth was thin and lipless, like a small line cut into flesh with a scalpel. He didn't speak again. No one did, until unexpectedly and quite suddenly they came to 2 more signs, indicating a left turn into what must be the long-awaited stopping place. Indeed, the first, smaller sign said, "Never fear, the end is here." The other sign stood at the opening to a large car park. Family Farm Services, it said in faded golden letters on a dark green background. And under a decorative flourish, the services were listed in smaller letters as follows: hot and cold home-cooked food, teas and coffee, soft drinks and beers, ice and confectionery, gift shop, ladies and men's WC, hot and cold shower and washing facilities, telephones, Wi-Fi, children's play, picnic area, rooms, a warm welcome and friendly. Under another flourish, in bigger lettering, the sign read, "All welcome, no dogs. Ask about our VIP service. Enjoy all the consolations and benefits of home while away." VIP service? Said Hannah, an accountant by occupation, who, her husband would attest, could be relied upon to notice small and often inconvenient details. "Pay extra and they won't spit in the bolognese," replied Ian, trying to be humorous. "Oh, Ian, not when we're about to eat," his wife complained. "Don't listen, children." "I mean, look at this place," he went on, regardless. "Retro or what? Proper spit and sawdust, this is." "Stop saying spit," said Hannah. "It gives me the ick." Noah took off one ear defender and said, "What?" "We're going to stop for a bit now, darling," she said. "Get out and stretch our legs. Get some food." "Will they have chicken nuggets?" asked Noah. "We don't know yet," said his mum, grimacing and crossing her fingers. "We'll have to see." Parking up under the shade of a tall fir tree, they all got out of the car, Ian groaning and stretching as he tried to straighten his posture, Hannah gathering the children and all their things. It was a sunny day, and strangely airless, and hemmed in by the dark forest, the car park in which they stood had a colour and atmosphere that was vaguely dreamlike, Ian thought. He was a writer, remember. Dotted at intervals around the perimeter of the car park were brown and green picnic benches, plastered with birds' mess, that gave the place an abandoned, unoccupied feeling, but reassuringly there were a few other vehicles parked. Among them was a motorcycle, which Ian recognised appreciatively as a vintage Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. But otherwise all was quiet, and for a few seconds he felt as if they were alone and miles from anywhere. That serenity was broken by a loud, piercing scream, so sudden that it made him clutch his heart. He turned to see Grace, who was standing horrified in front of the car, pointing. When Ian rushed to see what was wrong, he nearly screamed himself. He scratched his head, tilting it to one side as he tried to make sense of what he was looking at. Well, it seemed, the hind quarters of some small fawn-coloured animal, plastered over the grille, its little legs dangling, the front part of the creature having presumably been obliterated on impact. "I told you you'd hit something," said Hannah. "Don't look, Noah." What is it?" stammered Grace. "Is it a dog?" No," said Ian sharply, looking around him as if to reassure some imaginary audience. "No, it's a muntjac, I think. Or it was." "I've never seen a muntjac before, Mummy," said little Noah, wriggling out of his mother's protective embrace to survey the carnage. He was a sensitive soul when it suited him, but not entirely lacking the usual boyish enthusiasm for blood and gore. "Oh, Ian, what a horrible end to the children's holiday," said Hannah. "Why do you always do things like this?" "But it wasn't deliberate, was it?" grumbled her husband. I didn't wake up this morning thinking, I know what'll give the kids a treat. I'll get everyone in the car and ram it into the face of some poor defenceless animal. What do you mean, always?" "Ian," said Hannah, taking possession of their children and marching them towards the entrance, "we've spoken before about your tone." "What about your tone?" her husband retorted, flailing as he stomped after her. "Hannah, what about your tone?" The place they were entering, the so-called family farm services, loomed over them. It was surprisingly massive, having clearly grown over time, the squat pebble-dash mouth of the front yielding to a larger 3-story structure of red brick, with obvious later extensions and add-ons protruding on all sides, and 2 or more incongruous castle-like turrets sprouting amid the gables. Instead of a portcullis, however, the Pratts passed through a fly curtain of multicoloured thin plastic strips that rustled as they went. "What about your tone?" whispered Ian, catching up with his wife. "What about yours?" she hissed back. They were in what might be called a reception area, rather dark, not only because it was windowless and unlit, but because it was darkly furnished and decorated, all dusky greens and brown wood. "Why is it so dark?" said Grace. Noah wrestled his hand from his mother's grip and went to inspect what was evidently the aforementioned gift shop. Shelves and racks offered a mishmash of confectionery, postcards, camping equipment, alongside toiletries and other travel essentials. Some of the items looked very old. The boy slid back the lid of a big chest freezer advertising ices and leaned over the side, only to find it disappointingly empty, indeed of anything but ice. His little legs dangled inches from the floor. On the other side of the room were leather, more probably leatherette-covered seats and a row of telephone kiosks. But Grace had gravitated towards a display stand stuffed with leaflets advertising local tourist attractions. She sifted through them with a faint and increasing look of displeasure. Ahead of them was the cafeteria, its tables and chairs visible through the glass panels cut into the 2 wooden doors that separated one area from the next. "Corkweld," said Grace, reading aloud from one of the leaflets. "Come and see how cork is made. Discover the fascinating history of cork. Shop for cork from over 100 cork items for sale. New for 2006. Lord of the Rings in cork. See Tolkien's masterpieces, you've never seen it before. Made out of cork." "Hey you, put a cork in it," chuckled Ian, putting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. His daughter removed one earbud and said, "What?" "Look, can we just get some food?" said Hannah, exasperated, her hand already pushing at the door. "Someone's hangry," said Ian, giving Grace a knowing smile. "I'm not hangry. I'm angry," said Hannah. "Come on, Noah. You'll fall into that freezer if you're not careful. Why aren't you watching him, Ian?" They entered the cafeteria, wide and brightly lit, its few customers evenly distributed among the Formica chairs and tables. At the back of the room was the counter, behind which patrolled a formidable-looking woman in a light pink check tunic. On the wall behind her hung an extensive, in fact daunting, menu, an old-fashioned peg letterboard with the cafeteria's many dishes and prices painstakingly spelled out in individual plastic letters. The family approached the counter. "You'll have to clean that," thing off the car before we get back on the road," whispered Hannah. "Oh, really?" muttered Ian. "I was thinking of keeping it there as a kind of mascot. For God's sake, shut up, Ian. Don't make a scene in public." They were now poised at the counter, and Hannah began scouring the menu pensively. The large woman there turned to face them as they arrived, but the face that greeted them was blank. "Yes," she said, planting her big hands on the stainless steel surface in front of her. Her burly arms were dark, with thick, coarse hair, and a tattoo was peeking out from under the short sleeve of her tunic. Can we just get some drinks to start with?" said Hannah. "What drinks?" said the woman. "Well, a big bloody gin and tonic would go down well," she replied, with a brief snort of laughter. And since no one else reacted, it must have been for her own amusement. Actually, can I just get a coffee, please? A flat white or a cortado?" "One milky coffee," said the woman. "I'll have a coffee too. Cappuccino," said Ian. "2 milky coffees." Grace pondered the menu and the glass-doored fridges behind the counter. "Can I get a Coke Zero?" "1 Coke." "Noah," said Hannah, removing one of her son's ear defenders. "What do you want to drink, sweetie? Do they do chicken nuggets?" "No, baby, we're not ordering food yet. What do you want to drink?" "Milkshake." And can I get a milkshake, please?"
"What flavour?"
"What flavour, sweetie?" "Banana." "Banana?"
"We do chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, or persimmon."
They don't do banana, sweetie. They do chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, or persimmon."
"It's like an apricot,"
said the woman behind the counter. "It's like an apricot, baby." "Strawberry, then." "Lovely. Oh, thank you, sweetie. And can I get a strawberry milkshake, please?"
"Food?"
asked the woman severely. We will be, but we'd like to peruse the menu first," said Ian. "Peruse," scoffed Hannah derisively. "That's what you do with menus, isn't it? You knew what I meant, didn't you?" he said, turning to the woman hopefully, and for the first time he noticed the chalkboard on the counter next to her enormous left hand. It read, "Today's special, beef madras."
"Sit down and the girl will bring your drinks to you,"
she said.
"She'll take your orders too. Menus are on the table."
They did as they were told, some other patrons watching them as they sat, making awkward and unwanted eye contact. Ian noticed a bald man who was busy mopping up baked bean juice with a thick slice of white bread. From his motorcycle leathers and motorcycle helmet, Ian singled him out as the owner of the fat boy outside. As their eyes met, Ian nodded at the bald man with raised brows, trying wordlessly to convey his admiration. He even made a little motion with his hand that mimed the twisting of a throttle. But the man looked away, embarrassed, shaking his head. Ian felt a tug at his sleeve. "Ian," whispered Hannah, "I don't think they do chicken nuggets." She was clutching the menu, a heavy leather-bound volume of some 24 or more laminated pages, desperately scanning the dense print. "Yes, they do, look. Right there. Chicken goujons." "Shh," said Hannah, too late. "I want chicken nuggets," said Noah. "I don't want goujons." "Oh, it's the same thing," said Ian. "Goujon, I think, is, just French for nugget." "No, it's not," Grace interjected, indignantly, because French was one of her GCSE options. "It's like a long nugget," Hannah told Noah. "Imagine a nugget, but someone at the factory stretched it." Noah's bottom lip began to quiver. His mother and father looked around helplessly. "Oh, look, there's a play area outside," he said, gesturing to a sign above a side door. "Gracie, why don't you take your brother outside for a go on the swings and slides? Just until we get our food and drink." She made a face. "God, that's so lame, Dad," she said. "It's total cringe." "I'll give you £10, he whispered. "Ugh, 20, she said. "Done." "I'll have the tuna melt panini, thanks," she said, closing her menu, with crisps but no salad, and together she and Noah left the table for the play area. Their father let out a sigh of relief. Thank God for that. I thought he was going to start. He looked around the room. An old woman and a younger man, her son presumably, stopped staring in his direction and instead stared solemnly into their teacups. Then the bold motorcyclist, having finished his meal, got up suddenly, pushed his chair under the table, picked up his helmet, and walked over to the counter. He watched as the bold man spoke confidentially to the woman, saying something which made her smirk, the first bit of emotion he'd seen from her, and was directed to the door at the far end of the counter, above which was a sign that said simply, "Toilets, rooms." "What are you thinking?" His wife spoke. "Oh, God," said Ian. "To eat," she prompted. "Oh, right. He chewed the knuckle of one finger. "I'm tempted by the beef madras, but I'm worried it'll be a bit heavy." Hannah flicked through the pages of the hefty tome in front of her. "Where's that? I didn't see that. What page number?" No, it was on the specials board," he replied. "Oh? What other specials were there?" said Hannah. "I can't see from here," he said, putting his glasses on and taking them off again. But he saw that the bold motorcyclist had left his helmet on the counter, having placed it there while conferring with the woman. "I don't think you should have it anyway. You know how you are with curry these days. Well, spicy food generally. We don't want to have to keep stopping. And what about you?" he said, cutting her off. "What do you want, Hannah?" They both fell silent. He immediately realized that somehow, without intending it, at least consciously, he'd asked a question, or rather phrased the question in a way that seemed heavy with meaning, full of import. A question with multiple answers, some of them catastrophic. And from the sudden silence, it was clear they both felt it. Luckily, fate intervened, or rather the waitress. She placed a tray on the table between them and began distributing its contents. She was pale and skinny, and reminded Ian of Popeye's olive oil, right down to her hair, scraped back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face, and tied in a neat bun. "2 coffees, a Coke, a strawberry milkshake," said the waitress, "and a bloody big gin and tonic." "No, that was a joke," began Hannah, but she picked up the glass and immediately drained half of it. "Now then, big question," said the waitress in her West Country burr. "Have you decided yet? Or do you need more time?" "Eh?" said Ian. She was poised with a notepad and the pencil plucked from behind her ear. "To order food. Are you ready, or do you need more time to think?" Hannah breathed a sigh of relief and put down her menu with a thud. "Can I get the salad niçoise, please? And can I get the tuna melt panini, but can you make sure there's no salad on it?" She bit her lip. "Can I ask, these chicken goujons, how goujon-y are they on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being very, very goujon-y, 1 being, well, not very goujon-y at all, practically a chicken nugget." Oh, they are chicken nuggets," said the waitress, nodding vigorously. "Yeah, they come out of a big bag that says chicken nuggets. Yeah, don't worry about that. Chef makes us put goujons on the menu, but it's only on account of her going to chef's college and getting certifications and all that." "Oh, thank God," said Hannah. "Yeah, no, you'll be fine," continued the waitress in the same vein. "It says goujons on there, but it's just nuggets. People often ask, and I always just say they're nuggets, because people do worry, if they has allergies and such, because you never knows nowadays, and because of the French thing, but they're chicken nuggets, simple as." She paused, suddenly, concern etched on her cartoonish oval face. Unless you wanted goujons, that is." "No, what you've described sounds amazing, thanks," said Ian, reaching down to scratch some eczema on his shin. "But can you just make sure that the nuggets, chips and beans aren't touching each other? Maybe bring 3 separate bowls to be on the safe side." "3 bowls, certainly, sir," said the waitress cheerfully. "And what will sir be having today?" Ian slapped the menu book shut and stretched. "Do you know," he said proudly, even defiantly, "I think I'm going to have the beef madras." "Oh, Ian," said Hannah in dismay. "Very good choice, sir. And does sir want the poppadom stack with a quartet of traditional Indian writers to accompany?" "Yes, please," he answered, rubbing his hands together. "Ian, it'll make you sluggish," Hannah protested. "Oh, give over. If he wants it, let him have it," said the waitress. "I likes a man with a big appetite, I does," she giggled. "Well, that means there's more of them to love, isn't there?" And with one lanky arm around him, she began pinching his flank, clasping folds of flesh through his shirt between her long, slender fingers. "I loves it, I do, having some great big lummocks on top of me, hammering away, so big I can't even get my arms and legs around it. Ooh, it's like you're being crushed, that feeling you couldn't get away even if you wanted to. But you don't want to, not never."
"Leave him alone, Olive,"
bellowed the voice from behind the counter. There was a weariness to the voice that suggested this was a regular occurrence. The waitress, who had been staring into the middle distance and chewing her pencil, was suddenly snapped out of her reverie. "Will that be everything?" she said, composing herself and smoothing the wrinkles in her tunic with her long fingers. The Pratts nodded. "Okay. Well, if you need anything else, just give me a nudge." "Madam?" she said, and then in a huskier tone, "Sir?" Hannah bit her fist and scowled. "Well," she said finally, "this is a new low for you, I must say." "Look, I fancied the beef madras, okay?" explained Ian. "The heart wants what—" "I'm not talking about the beef madras, Ian. I'm talking about whatever that was. You flirting with that little tart, making an exhibition of yourself. Thank God the children weren't here to see it. You're old enough to be her father, by the way. And how humiliating for me, with everyone looking at us." Ian surveyed the room again. There was a man behind a newspaper, and another man was eating a steak and kidney pie with quiet intensity. There was a very old man sitting at the table, face down and asleep, by the sound of it. The old woman and her son were just leaving. The thought crossed his mind that the bold motorcyclist had not yet come back to reclaim his helmet. It was still there on the counter, exactly where he had placed it during his whispered exchange with the woman. "Are you even listening to me?" said Hannah sharply. Ian spoke carefully, knowing that to accuse his wife of overreacting would cause her to overreact. "Look, it was her that started with the touching and everything. I wouldn't call that flirting. If anything, she assaulted me. It's been a stressful day. Everyone's a little, let's try and relax a bit. We've got another 3 hours in the car at least." Hannah gasped and shuddered. It was her turn to survey the room. Her eyes searched the place, as if looking for a means of escape. Just then their children returned. "Ah, look who it is, Han. It's our darling children," said Ian. "How were the swings and slides?" But the children were pale, deathly pale. Indeed, to look at them, it was plain to see they'd had some kind of shock. "Are you okay, Noah, baby?" asked Hannah, taking her son's hand. "What happened, Grace? You were watching him?" "Yes, and nothing," she said quietly. "It was just weird, that's all." "This whole place is weird," said Hannah. "Where even are we?" They all consulted their phones to find they had no signal. "I'll ask Olive next time I catch her eye," said Ian. "Who's Olive?" said Grace. "Your dad's new girlfriend," muttered Hannah. "For sake," said Ian. "You can't just ask someone where we are. They'll think we're right Pratts," said Mrs. Pratt. ask her for the Wi-Fi code, said Ian. It's all been weird since Daddy hit that muntjac and we nearly crashed, said Noah. I didn't hit the muntjac, Noah. If anything, it hit us. It came out of nowhere. Baby, said Hannah, have a sip of your milkshake, there's a good boy. Now tell Mummy what happened outside in the play area. They waited as the strawberry-flavoured milk travelled up the straw into young Noah's mouth. A third of the drink disappeared, then another, before he could be coaxed to say more. There were things out there, the boy began. What kind of things? Said his dad. Pedos? No. Noah shook his head, tousling the little blonde mop of his hair. Nothing like that. Not anything you could touch or that could touch you. Oh, it's like one of your horrible stories, Ian, said Hannah. It was really weird, Dad, Grace chimed in. What was? The parents said. The trees. All around us, in the dark forest. It was like there was a sound that only we could hear. Sort of a whisper, but also a scream, and whatever it was watching us or warning us. Hannah looked at Ian and mouthed something along the lines of, I don't know what this is. Ian shook his head, but some part of him remembered his own father as having been pragmatic and unflappable and level-headed in all manner of challenging situations, and he remembered how comforting it had been as a child to have that stoic, resilient, sensible presence to reassure him. Even though he was truly nothing like his father, he slapped his hands on the table and said, Do you know what I think? I think it was probably the sound of the wind in the trees, or a pylon, or a utility pole or something. I think that's it. I think what's happened is everyone's a bit tired, a bit hungry. He looked at his wife. Probably a little bit grumpy. She rolled her eyes. Everyone had a bit of a shock in the car about the thing and the thing, and we all just need to calm down and helmet. His voice trailed off, partly because even he wasn't entirely convinced by what he was saying, partly because he noticed the helmet belonging to the bald motorcyclist again, and moreover couldn't help noticing that the bald motorcyclist had still not come back. Calm down and helmet, said Grace. What? You said calm down and helmet, said Hannah. Yes, said Ian crossly. Calm down and helmet. It's an expression, an old expression, isn't it? You must have heard it. It's finally cracked, said Hannah. He got up from the table. Where are you going? Toilet. Hopefully when I get back, our food will have arrived. That's what usually happens, isn't it? He left them and scurried quickly over to the door with the sign above it that read, Toilets, Rooms. On the other side of that door was a passage, and on his left were two doors clearly leading to lavatories. To his right was a staircase leading up. It of course occurred to him that the bald motorcyclist could very well be in the toilets. Perhaps he was the kind of person who takes a lot of time over his business, for instance. Or he'd sat down in there and fallen asleep, or died. Ian now realised he wasn't even overly concerned about the man's welfare as much as he was curious. For Ian was a writer, and a writer of mystery and horror stories chiefly, under a nom de plume, of course, never Pratt. And his writer's imagination had been pricked by that man disappearing through that door as much as half an hour ago and not returning, and the conspiratorial chat with the woman that preceded it only added to the intrigue. Something told him that the story unfolded not in the toilets, but in the rooms, and so he proceeded to the foot of the staircase. A sign on the wall said, "Rooms this way," with an arrow pointing up. So he went up, the stairs creaking under his tread, persuading him to tread cautiously, even though these were presumably rooms that customers could rent, so it couldn't remotely count as trespassing. At the top, he was presented with a long corridor, white doors on either side, panelless and plain except for numbers, behind which were obviously guest bedrooms. Nothing unusual there, and it occurred to him that the bold motorcyclist might be behind any one of those doors, having decided to get some rest for the night, and having absent-mindedly left his helmet downstairs. But at the far end of the corridor, facing him, was a final door, and somehow his writerly instinct, perhaps, an inkling, somehow he knew that what he sought was behind that door. Placed in front of it were two brass stanchions connected by a faded velvet rope, and a sign he couldn't make out at that distance. So he moved towards it, not slowly, not quickly, but purposefully, and as he approached he saw that the sign said, "Private, VIP only." He knocked timidly at first, and, getting no response, he knocked again. A voice within, female, northern, said, "Hang on a tick." He moved one of the stanchions aside, opened the door, and strode in. He found a small, plain room. There was a white wooden chair pushed against the wall. The walls were papered and painted a pale yellow. To his left there was a double bed with a chintz duvet covering it, and on top of that, coarse grey paper had been rolled out. It ran from the pillows to the foot of the bed, something you'd expect on a doctor's examination table, but not a bed. There were two more doors in this room, one on the left, just beyond the foot of the bed, one in front of him. And out of that one, a woman with long auburn hair had clearly just emerged and was busy locking it, with her back to him. She turned. "Oh, hello, love," she said. "I'm Pearl Micklethwaite. Have you booked?" Her face was flushed, and she was slightly out of breath. But those weren't the most remarkable things about her, at least as far as Ian was concerned, for she was wearing a black lace basque with stockings and suspenders. Ian was unsure of the exact wordings for such things, but they fell into the bracket of what he considered sexy lingerie. Indeed, her get-up was very similar to, if not the same, as something he'd once, in a moment of over-exuberance he later regretted, bought for his wife. She'd laughed at him when he showed it to her, and he cringed seeing it now. "No," he said, not knowing quite what to say. "No, I was looking for a man." She nodded sympathetically. "Well, I do that, but there is a surcharge. Will it be cash or card, love? I can do chip and pin." "I'm sorry," said Ian. I think I've made a mistake." Don't be a daft apeth. You won't be the first to come in here all fired up, full of bravado." She moved closer to him, her hand touching his arm lightly. "And then reality kicks in, and the wind goes right out your sails, I know. But I also know how to set it right. And I'll see to it you have a right lovely time, don't worry." He gulped. She was middle-aged, older than his wife, but not unattractive. In fact, he thought she had a very kind face, as well as a very calming personality. She gestured to the white chair.
Pop your togs over there, she said. Or if you prefer, I can undress you. Is that something you'd like? It does eat up a bit of time, but I don't mind if you don't.
He looked blankly at the chair. She opened the door on the left, which led to a bathroom.
Just give me a mo to titivate myself,
she said, out of sight.
Sorry if I looked a bit of a mess. Oh, I've been run ragged so far today. I do like to look my best for my VIPs, but you kind of caught me on the hop. Did you plan to come to see me today, or was it a spur-of-the-moment thing? It doesn't matter, only if you book in advance I can make sure I've got all the apparatus ready, etc.
She re-emerged from the bathroom, with her hair rearranged and her makeup reapplied, and, despite himself, Ian felt a twinge of what exactly? Excitement? He couldn't remember. She was now partially covered with a thin mesh lace robe, which struck him as odd, having already seen what was underneath.
Now, I'm a northern girl, as you can tell, and I find it pays to be upfront with things, so if there's anything you want to do that isn't what we call vanilla, let me know now. And, have you got any unusual features on your body? Any scars, bumps, rashes, abrasions, extra nipples? And none of it's a problem, by the way. I just don't like surprises.
I've got, he said, swallowing, I've got a bit of eczema on my shin. She lowered herself to inspect him.
Oh, yes,
she purred.
It's only a nickel patch, though.
She looked up at him kindly.
It's hardly the singing detective, is it, love? It's quite sexy, really,
she cooed.
A different texture.
He grimaced as her delicate fingers slid up the back of his pale white legs. He groaned through gritted teeth as her hands strayed under the hem of his chino shorts and came to rest there.
I must say, though, you've got some brass neck coming up here while your wife and kiddies are waiting downstairs. Won't they wonder where Daddy's gone?
He recovered himself and briskly moved away from the crouching woman. Look, he blustered, this is a misunderstanding. I came here looking for the bold motorcyclist. I thought he was in here, but... He looked at the door to his right, the one she was locking when he came in. She followed his gaze and stood quickly. What's in that room?
Nothing,
she sighed, her fingers toying with the collar of his polo neck.
Everything you want is right here, babe. In this room.
He's in there, isn't he? He's... Shh! She placed a single finger on his lips.
Forget about the room. Forget about your silly motorcyclist. You belong here. With me.
She was speaking softly in his ear, and so closely that her red lips brushed his lobe as she went on.
You saw the sign outside, didn't you? VIP. And that's you, isn't it? Very important person.
Her tone was sympathetic.
But you don't feel very important, do you? You poor baby. Those people downstairs, your family, they make you feel very unimportant, don't they? Very insignificant.
She bit her lower lip, and, fussing with the buttons on his shirt, gave him a meaningful look with her kohl-rimmed eyes.
But up here, up in Pearl's room, it's all different, isn't it? Because I know how to make you feel very important. Very, very important. If you'll just let me.
She was about to place her ruby-red lips on his throat when he roughly, and rather uncharacteristically it must be said, shoved her away. Indeed, he pushed her with such force that she tumbled onto the bed, ripping the rolled-out grey paper as she landed. She looked up at him, over her shoulder. She was trembling, and something about the terrified face, partly covered by strands of auburn hair, gave him an electric feeling, an energy that he hadn't felt in a decade or more. No self-doubt, just single-minded purpose. Well, he looked from the door to her, then back to the door, then back at her, absurdly, for he was diligently monogamous. He had half a mind to ravish her, and ravishment was very much the word for it, he thought, but he must see beyond the door. Imbued with this sudden, pulsing, renewed sense of masculine power, he charged at it, shoulder first, only to find that it didn't yield quite as expected. He rubbed his arm and steeled himself for a second attempt.
"Wait,"
said Pearl.
"You'll do yourself a mischief, love. Here, take this."
She rummaged through her cleavage for the key, then handed it to him. He fumbled with the key in the lock. He thrust open the door. What Ian saw, he could scarcely believe. It was a bedroom, immediately familiar to him, and though it had to be a facsimile, it felt entirely authentic, as if crossing the threshold into that previously locked room, he had also somehow crossed a threshold into another place, another time. Oh, everything was exactly as he remembered. The single bed with its daisy and sunflower patterned quilt cover, the mint green wood chip on the wall, the framed picture that hung there, slightly askew, of cigar-chomping dogs playing pool. He saw the old wardrobe, the one that if you looked for long enough, you saw strange faces in the grain of the wood. Goodness, how that had troubled him as a young child. "I don't understand," he said quietly, not hearing the door pulled closed behind him, not hearing the key turn in the lock. He saw the cabinet by the bed and knew exactly what he'd find in the drawers. The small red Gideon Bible, the metal box full of black and white drafts counters, an old metal kaleidoscope, already rusting, that Evening Standard souvenir paper commemorating the 1972 Tutankhamun exhibition. Sure enough, they were there. Outside, low voices talked. He barely heard them. He sat down on the bed. His bed. The one in his childhood bedroom. On the cabinet next to it was his lamp, the one with the gold shade with frayed tassels, and his glass of water from the night before, a scattering of pinprick bubbles now clinging to the sides, and of course his books, now as then, mysteries, adventure stories, horror, nothing too scary. One had had a cover so frightening he couldn't get to sleep even knowing it was in the same room, and he reached for one of the books, a big anthology of animal stories, hard-backed, the dust jacket slightly torn from his own youthful, careless handling. He turned to the most looked-at page, the very first page of the book, upon which had been stuck a certificate. Headed with the name of his school, it read, "This prize for creative writing is awarded to Vincent Ian Pratt." He smiled then, a sudden realization dawning. Vincent Ian Pratt. He laughed, at first falteringly, like someone only half understanding the joke. That shortly gave way to a big belly laugh. and very soon he was crying with laughter. Crying, laughing, and laughing because he was as yet unaware that he was also sinking, already sinking into the bed he was sitting on, his old bed, being pulled down, sucked down, excuse the expression, arse first, and that in moments he would literally fold in half, his legs meeting his torso like a book slapping shut, and on his way to meet whatever was, whatever is, under the bed. Even he would have to admit it was a better ending than he could have come up with himself. Downstairs, his wife Hannah was remonstrating with the implacable giantess at the counter. Not only were they still waiting for their food, they were now also waiting for a missing Pratt. "He went to the toilet half an hour ago and hasn't come back," she insisted.
"Sometimes they wander off,"
said the woman, or to give her her name, Maud. "Oh, please, we're in the middle of nowhere. He wouldn't have just gone running off into the woods. He doesn't run for a start. I want the rooms upstairs searched, or I'll search them myself."
"Suit yourself, but I'm telling you, he's gone wandering."
Hannah, who had unfulfilled thespian tendencies, which occasionally rose to the fore, let out a rather theatrical howl of exasperation, and stormed off to look for her husband in the upstairs rooms. Such was her haste and determination that on her way through the door she nearly collided with a bald man in motorcycle leathers coming the other way. He exchanged a few brief words with Maud at the counter, scooped up his helmet, and went on his way. Maud shook her head and muttered under her breath, too quietly to hear. But on the chalkboard, under beef madras, she added another special. Mutton curry. And then she paused, chalk in hand. She was an imposing, taciturn figure, Maud was, but, like all of us, with a rich and many-layered interior life. And though she didn't display it often, she had a keen sense of humour. Indeed, had circumstance and heredity not cast her and her 3 sisters in their present roles as proprietresses of that God-forsaken place, she might well have pursued her ambition to be a stand-up comedian. Her eyes were fixed on the 2 Pratt children, one wearing earbuds, the other ear defenders, both staring glumly at their non-functioning devices, and with a smile playing on her hairy lips. On the chalkboard, she wrote, "Lamb stew." Today's story was The Pratts, written and read by me, Jasper L'Estrange. Well, it was a bit different, wasn't it? And I do hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, sweet dreams.